There's a force more powerful than any investment strategy, more valuable than any stock tip, and it costs nothing. Yet most people never discover it. Why smart people stay broke while others build wealth. You've seen it happen. Someone with a six-figure salary living paycheck to paycheck. Someone else making half that amount quietly building a fortune. The difference isn't intelligence. It isn't education. It's something far more fundamental: impulse control. And this single trait determines whether you'll spend your life chasing money or having money work for you. Here's what nobody tells you about wealth. It's not built by what you earn. It's built by what you keep. And what you keep depends entirely on your ability to resist the constant pull of instant gratification. Every swipe of your card is a vote. A vote for the life you're building or the lifestyle you're faking. And most people are voting themselves into financial prison without even realizing it. Think about your last impulse purchase. That upgrade you didn't need. That subscription you forgot about. That dinner you justified because you deserved it. What actually happened in that moment? Your brain created a story that made spending feel like winning. But here's the truth. Every time you act on impulse, you're transferring your financial power to someone else. Your money stops working for you and starts working for whoever sold you comfort, status, or temporary pleasure. The financial industry wants you to believe wealth is complicated, that you need sophisticated strategies, insider knowledge, complex portfolios. But the reality is brutally simple. You can know everything about investing and still end up broke if you can't control your spending. Because knowledge without discipline is just expensive entertainment. What separates wealth builders from wealth dreamers isn't what they know. It's what they do consistently when nobody's watching. Look at the patterns of true wealth accumulation throughout history. The people who built lasting fortunes weren't necessarily the smartest in the room. They were the most patient. They understood that every purchase is a choice between future freedom and present comfort. And they chose freedom. Not once, not occasionally, every single day. That's the compound effect of self-control. Small decisions, repeated over years, creating massive results. Here's the uncomfortable question. How many financial decisions do you make on autopilot each week? How many times do you justify a purchase with just this once? Because just this once repeated weekly for years isn't an exception. It's your strategy, and your strategy is creating your results. So before you chase the next investment opportunity, maybe it's time to investigate what's actually draining your ability to build wealth in the first place. How ancient warriors mastered money without modern psychology. Let me take you back 2,000 years. Roman soldiers were paid in salt. That's where the word salary comes from. But here's what's fascinating. These soldiers had a code, a systematic approach to resources that modern society has completely forgotten. They understood that discipline in small things created capability in large things. And they applied this to everything, including money. The Stoics had a practice called voluntary discomfort. They would intentionally give up luxuries to train their minds not to depend on external comfort. Sounds extreme, right? But they knew something we've forgotten. Whoever controls their desires controls their destiny. They weren't being dramatic. They were being strategic. Because once you need something to feel, you're no longer free. You're dependent. Now compare that to modern consumer culture. We're trained from childhood to solve emotional problems with purchases. Feeling sad? Buy something. Feeling bored? Buy something. Want to celebrate? Buy something. We've turned consumption into emotional regulation, and it's bankrupting millions of people who think they're just treating themselves. But treatment implies healing, and spending money you don't have on things you don't need doesn't heal anything. It just creates a different kind of pain later. Here's what wealth builders understand that others miss. There's a gap between impulse and action. Most people go from wanting to buying in seconds. But that gap, that tiny pause where you actually think, is where your entire financial future gets decided. In that moment, you either ask yourself, does this move me closer to my goals or further away? Or you just react. And reaction creates debt. Intention creates wealth. Think about successful investors, elite athletes, military strategists. What do they all have in common? The ability to delay gratification, the capacity to endure discomfort now for advantage later. This isn't willpower. This is strategic thinking applied to daily choices. They've trained themselves to see purchases not as isolated events, but as votes for the future they're creating. The trillion-dollar marketing industry exists for one reason: to collapse that gap between impulse and action, to make you buy before you think. And every time you fall for it, you're not just losing money, you're reinforcing a neural pathway that says, I can't control myself. Drop a comment if this is hitting different, because once you see this pattern, you can't unsee it. What separates wealth builders from wealth performers? There's a specific type of person everywhere you look. Designer clothes, luxury car, Instagram perfect lifestyle, and they're absolutely broke. Not struggling, not getting by, completely financially destroyed. But you'd never know it by looking at them, because they've mastered the performance of wealth while completely missing the actual construction of it. Here's how the trap works. Real wealth is invisible. It sits in assets that appreciate, investments that compound, and time freedom that accumulated capital provides. Fake wealth is highly visible. It's in cars that depreciate, clothes that go out of style, and experiences that vanish the moment they end. One builds power, the other performs it, and performance is expensive. I'm going to tell you something that might sting. Most people aren't living their life. They're performing for an audience that doesn't care. They buy things they don't need with money they don't have to impress people they don't like. And they call this success. But success isn't accumulation of objects. Success is accumulation of options. And options only exist when you have resources, not when you have payments. Look at actual billionaires. Many of them wear the same outfit for years, drive regular cars, live in modest homes relative to their net worth. This isn't cheapness. This is clarity. They understand that impressing others builds nothing except ego. And ego is expensive. Every dollar spent on status is a dollar that could have been compounding. Every purchase made for validation is power transferred to someone else's opinion of you. Now think about the average person. They work to pay for the car they drive to work. They finance a lifestyle they can't afford to maintain an image they don't even enjoy. And slowly, year by year, they build a golden cage, beautiful on the outside, suffocating on the inside. All because they confused looking rich with being rich. If this content is helping you see things differently, hit that like button. It helps the channel keep bringing these perspectives that most people avoid. How micro decisions compound into financial destiny. Let's talk about something nobody wants to admit. Death by 1,000 purchases. Not the big financial mistakes. Not the obvious disasters. The tiny, seemingly harmless decisions that slowly drain your potential for wealth. The coffee, the app, the upgrade. Individually, they're nothing. Collectively, they're everything. Here's the math nobody does. $5 a day on coffee is $35 a week. That's $140 a month. $1,680 a year. Over 10 years. Invested at 10% average return. That's over $28,000. You didn't buy coffee. You bought a down payment. You bought a year of freedom. You bought choices. And you consumed it in 15-minute increments without even noticing. But it's not really about the coffee. It's about the pattern. It's about training your brain that every small discomfort requires a purchase to fix it. Tired? Buy energy drinks. Bored? Buy entertainment. Stressed? Buy comfort food. You're not solving problems. You're numbing yourself with transactions. And numbness is expensive. There was a famous experiment with children and marshmallows. 1 marshmallow now, or 2, if you wait 15 minutes. Decades later, researchers tracked those kids. The ones who waited had better careers, higher income, more stability. Not because they were smarter, because they learned early that delayed gratification compounds. That waiting creates advantage, and that advantage multiplies over a lifetime. Now ask yourself, how many times this week did you choose 1 marshmallow now instead of 2 later? How many times did you trade future freedom for present comfort? And here's the brutal part. Nobody tells you you're making this trade. You only realize it years later when you look back and see you could have built something, but chose to consume instead. Financial self-control isn't about deprivation. It's about direction. It's about understanding that every purchase is a vote for the future you're creating. Vote for instant gratification repeatedly, and you build dependence. Vote for strategic accumulation, and you build power. The choice is yours, but the consequences are permanent. Why self-control is the ultimate competitive advantage. Here's what changes everything. Self-control isn't a personality trait. It's a trainable skill that compounds like interest. And just like compound interest, most people underestimate it early and regret it later. But those who understand it, they use it to build unstoppable momentum in every area of life, especially money. Every time you resist an impulse purchase, two things happen simultaneously. First, you preserve capital that can be directed toward assets. Second, you strengthen the neural pathway of discipline. And that pathway, the more you use it, the stronger it becomes. Eventually, resisting impulse doesn't require effort. It becomes automatic. You literally rewire your brain to default to long-term thinking. There's a concept in neuroscience called neuroplasticity. Your brain physically changes based on repeated behavior. Every time you choose discipline over impulse, you're not just saving money. You're literally building new neural connections that make future discipline easier. You're creating a biological advantage. And that advantage multiplies over time because each discipline choice makes the next one easier. Now think about identity. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you're becoming. Choose impulse repeatedly, and you become someone who can't control themselves. Choose discipline repeatedly, and you become someone who operates with intention. An identity shapes everything. It shapes what opportunities you see, what risks you take, what future you build. The wealthiest people aren't smarter than you. They're not luckier. They just have better control over their impulses. They've trained themselves to think in decades while others think in days. They've built the capacity to endure short-term discomfort for long-term advantage. And that capacity, applied consistently, creates results that look like magic, but are actually just math. Self-control in finances isn't about living miserably. It's about living intentionally. It's deciding who you want to be 5, 10, 20 years from now, and then acting every day in alignment with that vision. That's high performance. That's mental clarity. That's how you transform discipline into freedom. If this video shifted something in you, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next, and comment below which part of this hit you hardest, because this conversation is just getting started.